How are you guys doing today? Awesome. I'm going to have you guys start off by closing your eyes. And I want everybody to imagine that they're in a bathroom, that you're 5 years old. You don't have a cell phone, as hard as that is to believe. This is a time before cell phones. You're in a bathroom. The door is locked. On the other side of the door is a bad person. You can't stay in the bathroom forever. You don't want to leave. What do? How do you feel? Everybody open their eyes. This is often how the victims of childhood sexual abuse feel. Trapped, alone, not sure where to turn, how to handle the next situation. I'm going to tell you about my journey of childhood sexual abuse, continuing on to the Olympics. My story starts at the age of 5 years old. From the ages of 5 to 7, I was sexually abused by a good friend of mine's father. Now, this is somebody I knew really well. The whole stranger danger thing we learn about, great lesson, didn't apply. This is somebody I knew, this is someone I trusted. This was a friend, this was my good friend, and this was her parents. And when you're 5 years old, let's be honest, you're pretty little, adults are pretty big. So the sheer fact that they're bigger than you makes you trust them. Well, you trust your parents. Well, at least I did. And, you know, the first thing that I would do whenever, or at least my parents would do whenever I would head out the door is they would say, okay, mind and respect so-and-so's parents like you would mind and respect me. Now, my parents wanted to teach me good manners, and they should have. And honestly, I think they wanted me to be invited over to so-and-so's house again so that they got a break sometimes. And, you know, so they were setting up this situation unknowingly. They were setting up a situation where I would go to my friend's house and think of my friend's dad in much the same light that I thought of my own parents. So I would go to this friend's house, and man, was this guy cool. I mean, he was way cooler than my parents. So my parents, you know, I would have friends over, and, you know, my mom would be in the kitchen, and she'd kind of watch outside, you know, the window to make sure we didn't kill ourselves in the backyard or something. But, you know, she was always an observer of the game. Well, when I would go to my friend's house, he was always an active part of the game. If we were climbing trees, he was climbing trees. If we were playing hide-and-go-seek, he was playing hide-and-go-seek. So whereas my parents were always observing things, he was always just sort of like a big kid. Only he had a car and he had money, so it was a lot cooler. You know, when my parents worried about things like ruining your dinner and, you know, you can't have ice cream before you go to bed, things like that, this man didn't worry about that. We said we wanted ice cream, we got ice cream. So again, really awesome, way cooler than my parents. Well, this whole process is called grooming. Grooming is the process of gaining the trust of someone, in this situation, a child. Not hard to gain the trust of a 5-year-old. It's pretty easy. They have a TV show called, you know, How to Be Smarter Than a 5th Grader. All right, it's not hard to be smarter than a 5-year-old. Well, I remember one time, and I was at my friend's house, and we were playing hide-and-go-seek. And so my friend says, well, you know, she's the seeker. And so my friend's dad says, all right, well, hey, I have this great hiding place. And I'm like, okay, because, you know, I don't want to be caught, because that's the point of the game. So, you know, we go to my friend's house, and he takes me to the crawl space. And, you know, the crawl space to someone's house is what, yay big? Not talking about a super big window here. And this is a pretty large house, you know, good-sized house. And he says to me, he says, well, you know, Margaret, I found a frog earlier today, and I put the frog under the house. You know, maybe we can find it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I love frogs. Yeah, let's do it. So I happily crawl under the house thinking that finding this frog is going to be amazing, and on top of that, my friend's not going to find me. At no point am I realizing that this is a very small window of light under a very large house. And let's be honest, there was no frog. But even if there was a frog, the odds of me finding this frog after, what, how many hours it had been under there? Not going to happen. And that's just an example of all those red flags that are happening right now for all of you guys and for myself as I'm telling this story. That's what happens as an adult. As a 5-year-old, none of that happened. I was excited about finding a frog. Well, on that particular day, that particular instance, nothing happened. Honestly, I don't remember if my friend found me. I don't remember if he just got scared and was afraid he'd get caught. Who knows? Nothing happened that day. But I love that example because it's so easy to see how you can get a child into a situation alone and away from everybody else, and that child just willingly goes with you. You just got to find one thing that they're interested in. In my case, it was a frog. And, you know, not winning. Obviously, I'm not competitive or anything, so I didn't want to lose the game. So, you know, that was the interest point. Well, my abuse went on for a couple years. And then at 7, they moved. So I was really, really lucky. My abuse stopped for no other reason, not because of anything that I did. It was just because this family moved. I don't know if he changed his job. I'm not sure what happened. Well, I didn't tell anybody. This man had told me not to. And keeping secrets, that's a good thing. Nobody wants to be a tattletale. I wanted to be trustworthy. You know, that's something that, like I said, that's a good quality. So I thought, all right, you know, I'm not going to tell anybody. Well, at the great age of 11, you know, my friend and I are walking around the block and starting to talk about boys and that kind of thing. And for whatever reason, I told my friend. And she looks at me and she says, Margaret, I think you were molested. You need to tell your parents. Well, I was really lucky, because here in Huntsville, we had sexual abuse education in school. And even though I hadn't quite put the dots together, my friend knew what the word molested meant. I mean, that's a big word. I guarantee I couldn't spell it at that point. And my friend knew what that meant. And so she said, you need to tell your parents. And I said, oh, yeah, that seems logical, okay. My dad's an engineer, I know what logic is. So I went home that day, and the first clue my mother should have had that something was wrong was that, you know, it was a beautiful day outside. My mom's bordering a wallpaper around her bedroom. And I asked, I volunteered to help. So that should have been the first, you know, something's off here. And I will say here, interject, that telling is extremely important. However, if you can pick and choose your timing and maybe not do it when your parents are remodeling their house or doing something fairly permanent. My poor mother had to look at this border around her bedroom for the next however many years that we lived in this house, and every time she looked at it, thought, oh, that's when my child told me she was sexually abused. So maybe if you can pick and choose your timing during a slightly less permanent activity. But anyway, so I tell my mother, and my mother was amazing. She did all the appropriate things. She said, okay, and and she listened. That's the most important thing, she listened. Well, then after, you know, shattering her day, I go off and play or something. And, you know, she talked to my dad. They talked to my sister, made sure it hadn't happened to her. Then they called the police, because what else are you supposed to do? No, people don't know how to do that. And the police said, you're going to call the National Children's Advocacy Center. So they did. Well, I used to, as a little kid, I asked a lot of questions. And I remember asking my mom all the time, how did she know how to do things? You know, this, that, just whatever. And my mom would go, oh yeah, I learned that in mommy school. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, that made complete sense to me. I mean, I was in school, so it made sense that she'd been in school. And at no point did I think about, you know, was this a class in college? Does this happen in between high school and college? You know, when does mommy school actually happen? I was just like, yeah, she's in mommy school. Cool, got it, check. Well, mommy school doesn't cover what do you do when your kid's been sexually abused. And so that's where the National Children's Advocacy Center stepped in. They have all the different areas, all the different groups that you need to deal with. The DA's office, the forensic science, or the forensic interviews, I apologize, the medical examiners, psychologists, the police, the detectives, all the different pieces in this gigantic wheel, in this cog, working together, and they put it under one roof. Because you as a parent, and especially as a kid, you don't know what you're supposed to do. So they kind of took over, and they helped us get through it. Well, meanwhile, again, the great age of 11, I had done every sport known to man, and I was starting to figure out that I liked swimming. I'm clearly a little tall to be a gymnast, and I discovered I needed glasses during gymnastics, so, you know, that happened. And I took music for 3 years. I still can't read notes, so that obviously didn't take. And, you know, 11, 12, that's when I figured out swimming was going to be my thing, and I really liked it. I was pretty good at it, so that didn't hurt. And, you know, so my swimming career was kind of starting and getting serious around the same time that I was going through this process with the Advocacy Center and dealing with this sexual abuse thing. This was something that I had kept bottled up for a long time and hadn't really talked about. So I would go to the pool, and like any kid, honestly, any kid going through this, there was a lot of pent-up energy and anger and emotion and fear and just a lot of emotions I didn't understand and I didn't know how to deal with. And I was really, really lucky that, you know, not by design, but I had a healthy outlet where to express all of that energy. And I would go to the pool, and I would cry in my goggles sometimes, and I would get pissed off, and I would just take it out on the set and be worn out by the time I came home. And I had this healthy outlet that just kind of became my safe haven and became the place where I could go and I could escape, because you're alone in your head a lot during swimming, so you can think a lot. You stare at a black line. We're entertained easily. So, you know, I had this safe place. So my swimming career progressed for the next several years. Went on to swim at Auburn University, swam in college, made my first Olympic team at 21 years old, made my second Olympic team at 25 years old, got a couple medals, had a pretty successful swimming career. And I've had people since then ask me, they've said, well, you know, you didn't turn to drugs or alcohol, and you had this successful career. Did the sexual abuse just not really affect you? And the reality is it did affect me. It just didn't affect me in some of the more traditional ways. The reality is our culture values success. And we look at success as being this amazing thing. But behind the scenes, behind the curtain, you can't always see what motivates or what drives success. And a lot of what was driving me through those years wasn't healthy, and it wasn't coming from a good place. When I think about athletes, a lot of athletes become athletes, and they continue their career because they like to be special, and they like to think that they're better than people, or they like to have that one-upmanship, or winning that race that makes them feel good about themselves. So if the average person is here, they do all these things to somehow end up here. Well, I always felt like if the average person was here, I was somewhere down here. So I had to become an Olympian. I had to win medals. I had to have a 4.0 in school just to kind of level the playing field, just so I could feel good about myself, just so that I could walk into a room full of people and feel like I deserved to be there and feel like I belonged. And it took me a long time to figure out that that was, one, not healthy or normal, and two, that that was what was motivating me. So it wasn't always that it was coming from a good place. It's just not something that you can measure as easily as becoming a drug addict or an alcoholic. But in a lot of ways, it's just as unhealthy. Now, to be fair, it wasn't all bad. There were times that I remember back as early as my late teens, and I would stand on the blocks, and there were times when I would look at the other 7 girls in the race with me, and I would think, you know what? I'm stronger than these girls. I've survived something. I've lived through something. What in the world have they done? Now, let's be honest. I didn't know what in the world was going on in these girls' lives. Maybe they had been through something. They probably could have been through the same thing I'd been through. But I didn't know that. But these were the mental games I would play with myself. And I would tell myself these things. And so I would trick myself into thinking that I was stronger than someone, or that I had this strength because I'd been through something. And that was something I started in my late teens and carried on through my swimming career. And again, I didn't realize I was doing that until much, much later. But once I figured out I was doing, I thought, you know, this is something I can use to my advantage. This is a strength. This is powerful. This is something that, frankly, I think other communities do really, really well. You know, people that have survived car crashes, or that have had cancer, or that have just lived through anything terrible. I think there's other communities that do a really good job of looking at what terrible thing they've survived, and they say, I'm proud to be a survivor. I'm proud to have been through that. In October, in a couple weeks, it's going to be Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and you will see people wearing pink shirts and pink ribbons. In 1958, my grandmother had breast cancer. My grandmother to this day would not have been caught dead in a pink shirt or with a pink ribbon on her bumper. Because in 1958, you didn't talk about your breast, positive or negative. You just didn't talk about it. That wasn't the dinner table conversation. And the reality is I think the sexual abuse world is stuck back in the 50s. We're kind of back in that mindset where you don't talk about it. This is something you keep to yourself, and you just kind of push it under the rug somewhere. And I don't think we should do that. I think this is something that, it's a powerful thing. It's a terrible thing, unfortunately, and I wish nobody had to go through it. But it's something that I think that you can learn how to gain strength from. You can learn how to become a survivor and be proud of that. We do have a month. It's in April. Our color's blue. People don't usually wear ribbons, but I think we should start doing that. And I think it's, like I said, it's something you can be powerful and proud of. And that was something that kind of unknowingly I figured out how to do at the end of my swimming career. The reality is this is a road bump. Nobody wants to go through this, and you shouldn't have to. But if it happens, be that squeaky wheel. Tell somebody. Tell. Don't put D40 on it. Be squeaky. If you got to tell 85 people, tell 85 people. Someone will believe you. I was lucky, and the first 2 people I told believed me. That doesn't happen a lot. Be that squeaky wheel. Get help. This is not a fun topic, guys. Why in the world would you want to deal with this by yourself? It took an army of people to get me to the Olympics, literally. Doctors, trainers, coaches, teammates, my parents, my friends. I mean, there were so many people. I didn't do it by myself. I had a backup team getting me there. I also had a backup team helping me with my sexual abuse, the advocacy center, my parents, the very small number of friends that actually knew about it. It's not something you should deal with alone. Get proper help. There are a lot of people out there that care and want to help. And at the end of the day, you're not alone. 1 in 4 girls, 1 in 6 boys. That's a big chunk of this population. It's a big chunk of this room. Everybody can overcome this. Everybody can have a successful career, whatever that is. If you want to be a CEO, if you want to be an Olympian, if you just want to have a happy relationship or a happy marriage, whatever your definition of success is, you can achieve that. Like I said, slightly bigger road bump than a few others, but still just a road bump. Thank you guys so much. It's been such an honor standing up here today and having you guys listen to my story.